You know the character before he even speaks. You recognize the exact silhouette and the rapid crack of a Tommy gun in the rain. It is the sharp pinstripe suit, the tilted fedora, the cigar clamped in the jaw, and the absolute bulletproof swagger. Every one of those defining aesthetic choices traces directly back to this exact photograph of a single historical figure, Al Capone. But during the 1920s, the American underworld was crowded with hundreds of crime bosses. Many built larger syndicates, amassed greater fortunes, completely avoided prison, and then quietly vanished from public memory. Capone's enduring global legacy was a calculated three-part myth, drafted and co-authored by a sensationalist press, a desperate federal government, and the gangster himself. To understand how the myth started, we have to look at how Capone viewed himself. He violently rejected the word hoodlum. He craved respectability, telling anyone who would listen that he was simply a square shooter providing a product the public demanded. During the brutal winter of 1930, his kitchen served 3 meals a day to thousands of unemployed Chicagoans. It was a deliberate, highly visible operation to cultivate a Robin Hood persona in the midst of the Great Depression. He actively courted the press to maintain that image. He sat for regular newspaper interviews, hosted lavish, champagne-soaked parties for Miami and Chicago high society, and received thousands of fan letters from around the world. He even attempted to hire a legitimate literary editor to ghostwrite his authorized autobiography, hoping to cement his status as a benevolent American folk hero. Capone believed he could act as his own publicist. He assumed that by throwing money at the public, he could control his narrative. He failed to realize his fame was already metastasizing into something completely beyond his reach. Behind the charitable facade, the Chicago bootleg wars were an industrial-scale enterprise. Gangs battled for control of distribution networks that generated tens of millions of dollars a year in illegal liquor sales. Protecting those profits required military-grade hardware. The Thompson submachine gun became the tool of choice, capable of clearing out heavily armed rivals in seconds. The violence soon spilled into the open. Rival syndicates executed each other in broad daylight on crowded downtown streets, shattering any illusion that these men were peaceful businessmen. The absolute breaking point for the public arrived on February 14, 1929, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. 7 men were lined up against a garage wall and cut down by assassins dressed as police officers. It was a mechanical slaughter that made the soup kitchens look like a cheap distraction. Newspaper publishers quickly realized a crucial fact about their audience. A local bootlegger fighting for territory was mildly interesting. A terrifying, mythic supervillain sold papers by the millions. Capone was furious. His carefully crafted hero persona was drowned out by unauthorized stories, books, and articles, painting him as a bloodthirsty guerrilla. The press hijacked his visibility. They took the face of a local syndicate leader and projected it worldwide, constructing a monster because it was profitable. Meanwhile, local Chicago police and judges were thoroughly compromised by mob money. Desperate civic leaders bypassed them entirely, traveling to Washington to beg the federal government for intervention. To harness public outrage, the Chicago Crime Commission engineered their own public relations tool. They published a list of the city's top 28 public enemies. They deliberately placed Capone at the very top. By crowning him public enemy number 1, authorities gave the public a specific face to hate, generating the political capital needed for a massive federal crackdown. Federal investigators knew they couldn't definitively tie him to the assassinations, so they decided to attack his facade of legitimate business, targeting his finances. This chart illustrates their legal strategy. On one side, we see the government's estimate of Capone's income, over $1 million from gambling and bootlegging. On the other side is his reported income tax, absolutely zero. The government captured the media's monster and used him. Taking down the most famous criminal in the world was the ultimate trophy to prove the supremacy of federal law enforcement. Capone's obsession with the spotlight ultimately alienated his own peers. The board of directors sitting in the shadows, the other mob bosses, came to despise him. His desperate need for attention brought devastating federal heat down on their highly profitable, quiet operations. Stripped of his empire, Capone was shipped to Alcatraz, a fortress designed specifically to showcase the government's absolute authority over untouchable criminals. He spent his final years isolated in a Florida villa, his mind and body ravaged by untreated syphilis, a pathetic shell of the crime lord he once was. But while the physical man deteriorated in obscurity, the aesthetic archetype he inspired was immediately scooped up by Hollywood, living on in countless films and comic books. Al Capone desperately wanted to author his own heroic autobiography, but by constantly stepping into the public eye, he handed the press and the government the ink they needed to write a permanent, monstrous myth for him instead.